Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, inside of 2 weeks until this Michigan program kicking off in 2024. Want to go through this transfer portal class and talk about some of the newcomers that are going to have the biggest impact on this Michigan program in the 2024 season. And Dill, kind of prepping this one out here, I went and looked back at the last couple transfer portal classes, and this Michigan program does not get nearly enough credit in terms of how they use the transfer portal. Now, they aren't like teams like Colorado or Ole Miss or Florida State where they grab 20 to 25 guys in the portal, but you look at the hit rate. I mean, Michigan took 9 guys last year, and half of them hit in big ways. You look at this class and say early intel coming out of spring practice and fall camp, we're kind of looking at a high hit rate once again for this Michigan program. So, shout out to this Michigan personnel department, because I think they do a great job in the transfer portal. It looks like we got a strong class to talk about in the next couple of minutes. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Michigan fans, number one and most importantly, I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Michigan brought in 9 transfers. Dill, we picked the top 5. This list could look a lot of different to a lot of different people. So would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, kind of where you would stack these transfer portal impact players. And of course, if you all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Many of you guys know the boys are massive Michigan fans, and the amount of support the Michigan fans have shown the boys over the last couple of weeks and months, it means the absolute world. And Dill, without further ado, we got to start at number 1. The number 1 most impactful transfer portal addition has to go to Jayshon Barham.
And I think you kind of look at what Michigan had to do. I think in the years past, they didn't necessarily need as many high impact guys. I think because how many guys were returning from those 2021 year, 2022 into 23, like those guys who were kind of going to be the leaders, you knew who they were. And you still know that to an extent. But I think when you lose the amount of guys Michigan lost, especially on defense and in the offensive line, you needed kind of instant impact, high impact guys. And I think you look at what Jayshon Barham can be. I mean, he's an all Big Ten, possibly all-American level linebacker right now. And I think that's going to be huge as you replace guys who, like obviously Mikey Barrett and obviously Junior Colson, who were so good last year and had their hands on the game. And so,
yeah, one of the things is, hey, Jayshon Barham, although only going into year 3 of his college football career, has played a lot of football in the Big Ten Conference. Jayshon Barham was on our radar during his true freshman year in 2022. We played Maryland, and we said, who's that true freshman cat at off-ball linebacker that just looks a little bit different? This kid physically is special, and you're starting to hear some of those comparisons coming out of fall camp. Dill, one of the sources that I was kind of reading some, fall camp intel reports, I think I already said this before, he's a juiced-up Devin Bush. Dill, if he's anywhere close to a juiced-up Devin Bush, we're getting an all-American linebacker here in Jayshon Barham. And I think what's so exciting for Jayshon Barham is I think he fits Wink Martindale's scheme so well. You take a look at some of the snap counts of Jayshon Barham. Yes, played primarily off-ball linebacker, took over 100 snaps as an edge rusher for that Maryland defense in the 2022 year, and he can get after the passer. We all know Wink Martindale is going to want to affect the quarterback and bring pressure and be aggressive. I don't know if you could pick a linebacker to come into this Michigan program better fit for this Wink Martindale system than a guy like Jayshon Barham.
There's no disrespect to like Ernest Hausman. I think people sleep deeply on Ernest Hausman. I mean, people say as a transfer he's a bust and all this. It's like, yeah, he didn't play a ton last year because, again, Mike Barrett stepped up to the plate and was awesome last year. I mean, there just wasn't a ton of room to get on the field in that linebacker room. We all knew what Junior Colson was going to be. But Ernest Hausman, I mean, when he was on the field, was really good. I think at the end of the day, though, Barham gives you a much more definitive, ultra-high impact level player. And I know what Ernest Hausman is going to be. It's just Jayshon Barham shown up.
You talk about Ernest Hausman, the amount of disrespect that kid gets. I mean, one, it was year 2 of his college football career as a true freshman at Nebraska in 2022. Dill, he was 3rd on this Michigan defense in tackles last year. And like all this conversation about Ernest Hausman being a bust, I think that might have had more to do with like how he was evaluated out of the transfer portal. But you make no mistake about it, like that kid played solid football for Michigan and is going to be a really good linebacker for Michigan in the 2024 season. Dill, going to number 2, and kind of one of the biggest surprises coming out of Michigan's offseason, Josh Prie from Northwestern. When Michigan took Josh Prie, I kind of just thought it was a depth piece addition. And then you kind of read the reports out of the spring. You read the reports out of the fall. You go back to some of the film at Northwestern. Dill, one, this kid's played a ton of football, over 1,700 snaps, once again, in the Big Ten Conference, so you know it's going to translate, and only gave up 7 quarterback hurries last year. And then what's most important about Josh Prie is you look at this Michigan offensive line. We think it's going to be damn good. It's really talented, but it's inexperienced in terms of actual snaps on Saturdays in the fall. A lot of these guys are redshirt juniors going into 3-4 years within this Michigan program, but having actually played the offensive line position on Saturdays, there's not a ton of experience. You kind of just plug and play a very experienced offensive lineman in Josh Prie here. I think he fits like a glove in this Michigan offense here.
Yeah, I think that's fair because you're kind of right. The only guy who was going to come back with any real playing reps was going to be Miles Hinton. And you kind of look, I mean, Giovanni El-Hadi, I think we're all big fans of. If anyone listened to that interview he gave, that had some quotes on it that got me fired up. Shout out to him. Really excited to see what he can do. And then obviously Crippen, we've seen a fair amount, it feels like, in that spot duty. Always played really good. Always a guy you were kind of excited about. And obviously bring in 2 transfers in front of him in Olu and then Drake Nugent, who are obviously both really good players for Michigan too. So I think you feel really good, but I think you're right. I mean, to have a guy who's played some real like live snaps, if you will, should be very beneficial. And if he frankly earns a job, which it sounds like he's gonna, you kind of know, at least for me, I feel like the talent is probably a little higher than we're even giving him credit for.
That was my biggest takeaway. He kind of took the words right out of my mouth that he came in and was like a wall-to-wall starter for Michigan, like starting in spring and kind of just carried that starting spot into the fall. Not many question marks around him starting. What does that tell you about him? Because we think that there's a lot of other interior offensive linemen, guys like Raheem Anderson, who could definitely play guard at a high level. I think that tells you a little bit about what the level of play Josh can have for this Michigan offense. And Dill, the hit rate on Michigan offensive linemen in the transfer portal, super, super high, especially on the inside of the offensive line. Going to number 3, let's talk about my darling, if you will, and that's Albany cornerback transfer, Amir Hall. Now, Amir Hall sounds like he might get beat out by Jair Hill for that cornerback 2 spot opposite Will Johnson, which I think speaks much more highly about Jair Hill than it does Amir Hall. Because look, Amir Hall can play, and he's going to play. Like Jair Hill is a really good football player, but I could see Amir Hall at times playing a lot of football for Michigan. Dill, he's long, he's physical, and he provides much needed depth and experience to this Michigan secondary, specifically at the boundary cornerback spot.
You kind of want, I think all Michigan fans probably wanted to see Jair Hill take that position at that cornerback 2 spot. But again, we've had that lesson before. We all, I think, wanted Amari Walker too in the 2022 transition to the 2023 year. And obviously Josh Wallace kind of grabbed that position and really made it happen because Amari Walker just evidently they didn't feel was ready for that role. So I think he is, again, what you've kind of always said in this past offseason was he sets the floor for this Michigan cornerback room at a very high level. Again, probably doesn't quite have the talent, the upside that Jair Hill has, but he's going to set a really high floor for the Michigan.
And you talk about what made Michigan so special over the last couple of years, its depth. I mean, Will Johnson, there were games where he missed halves of games. There might be games where Jair Hill misses halves of games. Having just a guy that's played over 2,000 snaps at the college football level, was an FCS All-American last year. You talk about a complete roster. You talk about a deep roster. Having Amir Hall at your cornerback 3 spot, you feel pretty dang good about where Michigan is at that boundary cornerback position. Going to number 4, and Dill, this is going to be an interesting one. This was kind of one of my personal takes, Amari Walker. Why have him at 4? And again, there's a chance Amari Walker doesn't even play much for Michigan. There's also a really big chance that Amari Walker can unlock this Michigan offense. You know, we were looking for a boundary wide receiver that can stretch the field vertically. Look, Amari Walker, from a physical trait standpoint, checks all that box, right? 6'3", 180, extremely long, can absolutely burn in a straight line. He is the body type, the kind of wide receiver that Michigan was looking for in the transfer portal. And although the proven production isn't there yet, I guess my question would be, what happens if Amari Walker takes all of those traits that we all know he has and puts it together Saturdays in the fall here?
And that is the interesting thing, because I think we all knew they were going to make a run at some wide receiver who can play that boundary and stretch the field and be a little bit more of a presence than, frankly, what Michigan's had in the last, it feels like 2 or 3 years, ever since arguably Nico Collins, frankly. So, again, having a guy who you feel more comfortable being able to just create a little bit of space in this offense, not make it all so condensed and playing in a phone booth. So guys like Colston Loveland, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris can eat a little bit more underneath where they kind of specialize. I think he's going to be, I mean, you kind of look, they took him really quickly. I didn't even really feel like they were kind of taking looks at other guys to an extent. You kind of like right when Amari Walker hit the portal, he was right back at Michigan. There was no time wasted. They obviously know something about him, or at least we hope they know something about him. Because again, they didn't really wait much.
And you look at when Amari Walker decided to hit the transfer portal, like there was a lot of Michigan players that hit the transfer portal and were like, all right, not good, but like we'll be okay. I think Amari Walker was one of those names that Michigan fans were like, damn, that kind of sucks. Like we were excited about Amari Walker because it's important to remind ourselves he's only going into year 3 as a college football player. This kid is still young. We knew he was going to be a developmental athlete when we took him out of Louisiana in that 2022 class. It's all the traits are there. Let's just see if he can put it together. And again, if he does, the value is not necessarily what his box score says, but how well can he make opposing defenses respect what we can do vertically down the field. They're going into number 5, and quite frankly, should have been 4. That's Wesley Walker coming from Tennessee. This kid is, I think, one of the most. We cover a lot of these transfer portal additions, though. I don't think I've stumbled upon a defensive back that's more experienced than Wesley Walker, having played over 2,200 snaps in his career, all at the Power 5 level, whether it was at Georgia Tech or Tennessee. Played very good football for Tennessee in 2023, started every single game that he was healthy for. Dill, I think the narrative here is this is a reliable safety that's done a lot of different things in a secondary. Michigan leans towards these kind of guys. Like if you're a guy that is going to do your job every single play and provide that consistency, that's who's going to start for this Michigan defense. And it sounds like Wesley Walker is emerging as that guy during fall camp here, especially with the absence of Rod Moore.
I'm extremely interested to see who actually does replace Rod Moore for that first part of the season. Obviously, starting to hear the rumblings that he might be back at some point, which gets me fired up. But I'm kind of interested to see. You kind of know Amari Page was more of that inside the box safety, a guy who, again, much better matchup against tight ends in some of those areas that they wanted to use him, a little bit more physical in the box, has a bit more size. But again, who's going to play that free safety spot? I'll be honest. I kind of looked. I thought it was going to be Jaden Mangum. That's like when I looked at who kind of fits that mold more. Wesley Walker played a little bit of it at Tennessee, but it always felt like he was a little bit more comfortable, closer to the line of scrimmage than Jaden Mangum, who did have some good moments as that free ball hawking safety. I mean, it does sound like Amari Page is going to be one of the safeties. Sounds like Zeke Berry's going to be that nickel. I mean, Wesley Walker, I'm really interested to see what they kind of do with him, and almost like makes me think, is the defense going to look a little bit different than it did last year, where Rod Moore did have so much responsibility being that deep safety?
Yeah, so you talk about Jaden Mangum. What it sounds like is that he's, I wouldn't say struggling, but the playbook isn't coming as quick as it is for a guy like Wesley Walker, which, hey, makes sense. I don't think, the cross down the road in East Lansing, they ain't playing big boy football. So, hey, it's a little bit of a different brand when you come to Ann Arbor. That was unnecessary shot at Michigan State there. That being said, Wesley Walker's a guy that when you go back to his last 5 years, he's going into his 6th year of college football. He's played the nickel spot. He's played the box safety spots, but played the free safety spot. He knows defenses inside and out. I think that's what's allowed him to kind of come in and grasp sounds to be significant role within this Michigan defense. Those are our top 5. Again, a lot of other names that you could include. Obviously, the kicker coming over from Arkansas State, that's not one to kind of have fly under the radar. I think Michigan fans have always been blessed with just really good kickers. We haven't really had to put much thought into it over the last couple of years. Shout out our guy, Jake Moody. That sounds like he's going to be a reliable kicker, which matters when you're trying to win those big games against Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. Would love to hear from y'all in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.